Welcome, A-Pushers, to one of the most important things that you will learn all year, how to analyze documents. We're doing this early in the year because you cannot be successful in this class without understanding these 5 letters. HIPPO. So why do we call it HIPPO? First of all, you've got Bellowwall, our class mascot, the bagpipe Hippo. And so in the spirit of Pokemon Go fever, I threw together a Pokédex entry, and I don't know how many Pokemon there are anymore because when I played there were 150. So the fact that there are now thousands, to my understanding, I'm going to go ahead and call Bellowall Pokemon number 1776. And although he is comically ridiculous looking, he is still the original APUSH beast. And we will be seeing a lot of him throughout this year. So we have to ask ourselves, why Hippo, right? Like, why should we Hippo in this class? What's the importance of it? For one, every single multiple choice that you're going to have, most of my tests, and definitely on the AP test in May, every one of them will be connected to a source. If you don't understand the source, you can't get the question right. On second part, every DBQ will have at least 7, or most will have 6 to 8 documents that need to be analyzed properly. Over half of the points on the DBQ come from source analysis. And finally, even your long essays and short answers are often going to be connected to a source. So there is a chance that every single question you will have on the AP test will need you to analyze a source. As I said, you cannot be successful in this class without hippoing, without analyzing sources. So HIPPO, as the acronym that we have chosen for this class and that many other AP teachers use, comes down to those 5 letters, the most important of which is H. It's the first one for a reason: historical context. You can't understand a document without the context. The other letters, intended audience, purpose of the document, point of view, and outside information. We'll discuss each one of these in depth, but you're going to need to try to memorize this to the best of your ability so that you can, for every document, use historical context, H, and then at least 1 and usually 2 of the others as well. Let's go ahead and start with historical context. So historical context involves connecting the document you're reading right now to specific circumstances. So that specific word is very important. This is not just like, this seems like it's kind of like this other thing over here. It needs to be specifically within this time period. So if you're talking about a document, it needs to be connected to that time period. So vocab terms from that time period. So, or it can be connected to broader regional, national, or global processes. What does your reader need to know to understand the document? When you're reading this, what is the absolute essential vocabulary that you have to understand why this was written? So for instance, the Declaration of Independence. If you read this right now, all men are created equal, and you don't know when it was written or anything, you're going to read this and be like, duh. Yeah, obviously, I've known that since I was born. I've been taught this. Everyone knows all men are created equal. But if you read that in 1776, wow! I mean, that is just a massively revolutionary idea. And you cannot possibly understand why this made such waves across the entire world without understanding who King George was. Why colonists were so upset about taxation without representation, without understanding the Enlightenment thought. And so it is that you need these vocabulary terms, this context, to really understand and come back to this Declaration of Independence and understand its importance. You've got to have the context to be able to understand the Declaration itself. Okay, so that's why context is the most important, and you will have to do this for every document. Second, intended audience. You're going to explain to your reader, explain to me, explain to yourself who the author had in mind when he or she created this document. So use this if it's necessarily important, if who they're addressing it to is extremely important. So for example, the Emancipation Proclamation, where Lincoln frees all slaves of all southern states during the Civil War. The intended audience may come off as, it's just slaves. They're being freed, duh. But it's so much more than that. You have to realize that the intended audience goes broader than that. So his intended audience, though yes, it was slaves in the South and Southern slaveholders, it was also Europeans. Right? Europeans, and you're thinking, what? But if you can understand that, that shows true understanding of intended audience, that it went beyond just the surface level intended audience. So that's an extremely important part of the Emancipation Proclamation, is that it was intended for Europeans who were trying to keep Europe from entering the war on the south side of the Confederacy. Next, we're going to look at purpose. So if this, you're going to explain on your document, why was that document created? Okay, what was the true purpose of why this was created? For instance, the Common Sense by Thomas Paine was about the problems with Great Britain's excessive taxation, but it wasn't really just an economic statement. This wasn't like an article in the CNN that just said, oh, by the way, Britain's taxing us too much. No, it's so much more than that. Common Sense's purpose was also to rally British colonists. Right? Look at how much we are being taken advantage of by Great Britain, and it is only common sense that we break away, that we form our own government. Right? That's the purpose of the document. It goes beyond just what it may look like. Point of view, also important. Who is the author? Where are they coming from? Right? If you're reading an article about slavery from Thomas Jefferson, that's going to read a lot differently than if you were reading an article about slavery from a slave, from one of Thomas Jefferson's slaves, right? That changes things. Point of view is drastically important when you're reading a document. So for instance, Sojourner Truth, an African-American woman who is a former slave. Her Ain't I a Woman speech, her point of view is vital, right? A female African-American in pre-Civil War America was one of the most subjugated, had about as most difficult time throughout American history as you can imagine when it comes to oppression. She had little to no rights as a woman and as a freed slave. So her point of view matters so much because she's calling for equality both as a woman and as a black woman. And then finally, outside information. This is also known as synthesis. We're going to discuss this throughout the year. It's going to pop up and be very important throughout your document-based questions and your long essays. And it's a tough skill to master. But we're going to get some practice in with our primary documents. Outside information, or synthesis, is your ability to connect the document to vocab and larger events outside of the time period. Okay, outside of the time period, still within American history. So if we're looking at the Seneca Falls Declaration of Sentiments, this was the declaration of women's rights demanding the right to vote. It was a convention by a group of women calling for the right to vote in the late 1800s. Okay, so if you see this, if you're reading this, a synthesis, some outside information would be connected to the fact that it's written almost word for word like the Declaration of Independence, except that instead of all men, it's all people. So Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony are taking the words of the founders and using it against them to say that we founded this country on this Declaration of Human Rights, and yet women do not have those. Okay, connecting it back to that time period, to revolutionary America, to women calling for a revolution of their own rights. So in HIPPO analyzing, you're going to be doing this usually on a nightly basis. There will be typically 1 to 2 primary sources a night, and for every document, you're going to have to give historical context. Okay, so for every document, you must do historical context. You can't get away without that one. Then you're going to choose one of the other skills, whether that be I, P, P, or O, intended audience, purpose, point of view, or outside information. At most time, there will be a large stack of these in the back of the room. If we want to run out, there should be some online as well. If you want to type this, that's fine. Or you can print a copy off yourself from Rockspace. So that document looks something like this. You're going to see the title over here. You'll fill that in yourself. The author, Thomas Jefferson, lead author, along with members of the Continental Congress. Historical context, you'll do this for every one of them. Do yourself a favor and notice how I underline each one of these key vocab terms, right? I'm not just writing out broad, big ideas. Well, the American colonists were revolting. They didn't like Great Britain. Next. No, you want to get more detailed, connected to key terms, and if you underline them, it shows that you're really thinking about it. I want to be able to see those thought processes that you're making. After historical context, you're going to move over and do one of the other skills: intended audience, purpose, point of view, or outside information. So for this one, the Declaration of Independence. The purpose, as we said, though it is written as a letter to the king, it also had multiple purposes. It was, yes, a declaration of secession, of removing themselves from British rule, but it also serves as a rallying cry or as a piece of colonial propaganda. So that would be a very successful, well done explanation, historical HIPPO analysis of the Declaration of Independence. So I want you to take a look at this primary source. Columbus Discovers America, Saturday, October the 13th. Read it, think about it, pause this right now, okay? Pause it and actually read this. Think about the historical context and the HIPPO. And then once that's done, think about how you would write those down, right? What would that look like? So, in Columbus Discovering America, you see Declaration of Independence up top once again. But in Columbus Discovering America, you see similar. Once again, the title, the author in journal form, and 1492 was a massively impactful year, right? Columbus arrives in Hispaniola, important to know. That's context. It shows where it is. Human ideas and goods exchange, the Columbian exchange. Could have written that in there and underlined it. The Europeans believed themselves superior to the natives due to tech advances like weaponry. The Spaniards and the Portuguese came primarily for gold and God, so they would attempt to convert all natives. Okay, that makes sense. Now I understand what Columbus was talking about. If we're looking at the intended audience, Columbus is writing these entries to be shared with the king and the queen at a later date. He knows that they are interested in financial benefits as well as conversion of natives. So he talks about conversion, but he really focuses on the ability of those natives to be of financial benefit. Similarly here, if we're looking at this, what can you do? Pause it, think about it, get some practice in here. What can we see here? Not everything is going to be words. For here, we look at 1500. We know Columbus arrives in 1492. Blue is non-Native Americans, green is Native Americans. Look at this data. By 1750, non-natives outnumbered the natives, and natives had lost almost 6 million people in 250 years. What does that mean? What's the context? What's the intended audience, purpose, something like that? Pause it, think about it. So similarly, Columbus arrives in 1492, massive period of settling and trading. If you want to look more in detail into this one, a better explanation, pause it, read through this. But as you can see, it's a pretty simple task, but you got to understand the info to be able to do this. You can't just jump right into this information and just try to do it. You have to have the context. This is why it's so important that you do the homework, the modules, do your readings, watch your videos before you dive in and try to do our primary sources here. And so, HIPPO, why is it so important? Is because these are the skills that you will take with you into the real world. Source analysis is one of the most important things that I will teach you this year. And without understanding this, you're not going to succeed in AP US history. It's just not going to happen. Right? You have to be able to understand how to successfully HIPPO. So remember, for every document, use historical context. Without it, the document is useless. And then pick which of the other four you find the most important: intended audience, point of view, purpose, or outside information. So on behalf of my boy Bellawall and myself, much love.